Stay tuned. No, look like. Stay tuned.
Hi everyone, this is Julius from Electrify. With me is Zhi Wei, our Head of Product and Strategy. Zhi Wei, you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Zhi Wei. I am the lead for the product and strategy team in Electrify. So my background has been to study and understand the different structures that are out there. And one of the things that I want to bring to Electrify is the understanding of how the current markets are set up and how we can help move these markets to different model of the future.
We started Electrify because we came from the power industry, the energy industry, and we saw a couple of very painful gaps in the market. So some examples include the lack of transparency, the lack of consumer and business, the level of education amongst the business owners, and we felt that there should be a platform that would unify and put together all the information to make it accessible and convenient for both consumers and electricity retailers to reach one another. Yep. So that was the original intent. That was the retail marketplace platform that we launched back in 2017.
So Synergy is the name of our peer-to-peer energy trading product. How Synergy started was that it was intended to be an extension of the existing marketplace. So the current marketplace allows consumers to choose from different retail options that the retailers provided. What we wanted to do with Synergy is to enable small producers. In Singapore, this would be consumers with rooftop solar, such as a house or a factory or an office with rooftop solar with extra generation. We wanted to provide a platform for them to be able to sell this to other consumers. And that's really how Synergy started. In my experience, electricity markets, the development of electricity markets and transition is very path dependent, where the choices that you have or choices that you can make is very contingent on what is available or what structures are in place. What this means for the electricity market is that whenever we think about developing or deploying our solution in a country like Singapore or Japan or the Philippines, what we are very aware of is that we are entering into a market where there are established companies and businesses doing things a certain way and are very comfortable doing it like this. And so when we are bringing our solution, we are cognizant of the fact that we need to, at the very least, play by their rules and slowly mold the industry and regulations to support our product and our business. So, for example, what we're doing here in Singapore is to develop a framework around the existing regulations that allow us to effectively enable peer-to-peer trading. And this model or this framework will be more or less consistent. But when we try to deploy in Japan, for example, we will need to deep dive into their regulation and find out how can we localize the model to that country due to their current regulations. And so what we hope to do over time is to be able to slowly mold the regulations such that they are more accepting of Electrify as a company and peer-to-peer trading as a mode of transactions, as well as other exciting things that we have in plan for the platform. In the world today, there are primarily, I guess, three forms of delivering electricity to the end consumer. The first is you owning your own generation, like diesel generation in the basement or in the backyard. The second way is you can have a microgrid, where you and your neighbors string some cable together and share the generation. So maybe you may use your neighbor's generator or vice versa. And then the third is the main grid, and the main grid is sort of these monolithic entities where the power comes from a large central power station and it's taken along large transmission lines and delivered to your house. So this is sort of the way things are arranged now. Where we see the future going is that firstly the world is dominated by main grids now in terms of proportion of people served. And what we do see is two things. The first thing is that we see the prevalence of microgrids growing across the world in different use cases. But what we see is that as microgrids grow, it's not that main grids will go away or that they disappear, because there are definitely use cases where main grids will dominate a microgrid. For example, in a very dense city. And so how we see the grids evolving is that microgrids and main grids will become integrated, and it should be a solution where it should be a situation where if a microgrid would be the best way to deliver value to the end consumer, that should be the grid model that dominates. And if the main grid is the best way to deliver value to the customer, then that should be the model that dominates. Rather than a binary option, it should be very fluid, and we will see. So what you may have is you may have a little community within the city on a microgrid because they get really good sun, or the community banded together and built a community energy storage. They should be allowed to organize themselves as a microgrid and interact with the main grid. And what this means is that the tools and the organizations and the regulations need to be set up in a flexible way that allows these things to happen where they want to. I think as energy professionals, we want to be able to work on the big problems that are facing the industry. And one of the problems that we're trying to face here is where we see the industry evolving with trends like decentralization, rise of renewables, and what we recognize is that the current systems and the current models were designed for an era where big central power plants dominated, and this may not necessarily be the most ideal solution for the future. And so what we have in Electrify is a team that is willing to tackle these questions.
I think as people that come from the energy industry, what we see is this trend from centralized generation to decentralized generation. And as Zhi Wei mentioned, the way in which the power grids had been designed in the past were not designed for what the future that we're heading towards. And because of that, a lot of the regulation in some countries are not ready. The energy incumbents are not ready for this as well. And what happens if no one does anything is that the individuals, the consumers, they react in a way that is that poses more problems to the power grid. I think it's a huge waste if we end up with that outcome, because there's a lot of redundancy, there's a lot of sunk investment that could actually benefit everyone, but because there aren't tools for people and for companies to ease into this new mode of energy transaction, that these outcomes will be reached, and we don't want to see that happening. What we also see is that synergy, besides empowering people, empowering the small consumers and the big consumers, what it also does is it helps these big incumbents and big energy players transit smoothly, and we can avoid some of these very uneconomical outcomes.